right. Thank you all so very much for joining us here today. We have a special guest. I'm going to let Susan and Myrna take over and introduce our guest, and the mic is all yours.
Hi, it's so great to be here with my partner Myrna Scholar. And I'm Susan Michelle. I am the author of Surrender to Joy, From Suicide to Serenity. I teach the transformational truth of A Course in Miracles, which we are all here to study and embody. And Myrna Scholar is the author of Private Lessons with Jesus, based on the principles of A Course in Miracles. I love the song that Lynn just played. I'm reading lesson number 75 as the song is playing because today is the 75th day of 2024. And the lesson of the day is the light has come. I have forgiven the world. It's so powerful when you can embody that principle. And we are so excited to be here with Rob Swartz, whom I love. He's a good friend of Myrna Scholar, and I am getting to know him. I've been listening to his book all week that I fell in love with, his third book, Your Soul's Love. I've been listening to it on Audible, and I feel like I'm having light bulb moments and aha moments. And it's just so wonderful what you teach, Rob. And I Googled you, and I know you are an author, a speaker. I also listened to you with John Mundy, and I loved, loved, loved what you said. You're a hypnotist who specializes in past life soul regression, which is fascinating. And in this type of regression, you can speak with very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who can tell you what you plan for this lifetime and why, what you plan for this lifetime and why, how you're doing in terms of fulfilling your plans, and how you may better fulfill your plans. I just think that is so fascinating. And the book that I'm listening to now is Your Soul's Love, Living the Love You Planned Before You Were Born. I know your first book is Your Soul's Plan. Your second book is Your Soul's Gift. And I'm just so excited that you're here, Rob. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Susan. And hi, Myrna, and thanks for inviting me to be here.
Happy to have you with us.
Thank you.
And I know Myrna has taken your seminars, and she's had some wonderful illuminating experiences in your seminar. Did you want to start with that, Myrna?
Well, I'd like Rob to tell us whatever he would care to open up about that, the seminar, or let us become more aware of the past life regression that he, as a hypnotist, and the whole type of pleasure that it really is. That's what I call it, because I've been through it 3 times, as a matter of fact. So I'd like you to start with that, Rob.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Just a note of correction. It's not actually a past life regression. It's called a between lives soul regression. There is a past life component to it, but that's actually a very small part of it. So what happens in this kind of session, which you can do either as a private client or in the workshop that Myrna took, which is online, you start with some preliminary steps to relax physically and mentally. Then you do go into a past life. It's almost always one that had a big impact on your plans for the current lifetime. That's the premise of all the work that I do, that we as souls plan our lives in considerable detail before we come here, including the most challenging experiences we have. And so my work is intended to give meaning to suffering that to many people appears not to have any deeper meaning. So you go into this past life, you experience several different scenes there. You leave the past life in the death scene. Your spirit leaves the body in those last moments, crosses back over to the other side, which is very easy and gentle. And when you get back to the other side, most people are greeted by a spirit guide Sometimes it's a loved one, an angel. It could be Jesus sometimes. Whoever greets you, you talk to them about what's important to know about the past life. And then that being will take you to what is called your council of elders. Those are the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee your personal evolution. And once you are in front of your council, you can ask literally any question you have about your life. And if it's for your highest good, they will answer. Most people ask, what did I plan for this lifetime? Why did I make those plans? How am I doing in terms of fulfilling my plan? And how can I better fulfill my plan? But you can ask about any challenging experience you've had or are going through now. Why did it happen? What does it mean? How should you respond to it? You can ask about all the significant people in your life, past and present. Literally any question you can think of, you can put to the council. Many people will comment about the great unconditional love they feel radiating from their council. They will also talk about how they could tell the council had no judgment of them whatsoever. And they'll say things like, I could tell that my council knew literally everything about me, including all the bad things I've done in my life, but they loved me unconditionally anyway. And, you know, for many people, this is their first experience of true unconditional love since coming into body. So it really feels like a homecoming to many people. It's usually a very deeply healing experience. As I said, it gives meaning to suffering that to many people appeared not to have any deeper meaning. People ask about their life purpose, how to spend the remaining years on Earth. It's really a profound experience. And Myrna, I don't know if you want to share anything. It might be too personal, but Myrna could tell you about it firsthand.
Well, I loved it enough to do it 3 times. 2 times were for a full weekend, and another time was just one day. Nevertheless, the experience was wonderful. It really was, and that's why I repeated it. First of all, you hear Rob's voice. It's very soothing. You trust the voice. And in fact, what Rob does is he gets us familiar with the voice even a couple of days before we kind of tune into the meditation, and we go into it a little bit. So by the time we take the seminar, we really know his voice. And I tell you, I never thought I could be hypnotized. But I experienced the wonderful hypnotic trance, if you will, that I really experienced. It was wonderful. And you really take us way, way down deep into the depths of love. That's what you call it, love, forgiveness, healing. And at first I was saying, I'm playing along with this. It's wonderful. I'm just playing along until I really had an experience. The experience that I had was, I call it a God experience, because at one point you say, now feel the oneness of God, which is also A Course in Miracles, feeling the oneness of God. But the experience that I had was I was lying down and I felt this wonderful entity, if you call it that. It was an energy that entered my body literally, and I call it convulsing, and that's what I was really doing. But it was such a pleasurable experience, and then it subsided, and I tried it again, and the second time was even more so. I often try to get back there on my own, but I've never succeeded. So that really gave me the recognition that what you do is really relating to the universe, the wholeness of who we are. To get in touch with God on that level was a wonderful experience for me. And in fact, my daughter took the seminar as well, and it was great doing it with her. It was wonderful. And
yeah, thank you. I appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah. And go ahead, Susan.
I love how Rob's work aligns with A Course in Miracles. I heard you quote A Course in Miracles in Your Soul's Love. In your defenselessness, your power lies. And I actually have a question for you, Rob. I'm listening to your Audible book, I should say, and I quoted quite a few lines. In our pain lies our purpose, our vulnerability. The power is in the pain. The way to the love is to walk through the fear. Now, this is something that I have been learning throughout the course of this lifetime, because on one hand, A Course in Miracles is non-dualistic, only the love is real. God's will for me is perfect happiness. You go on to explain in your book how in this world we learn through contrast. We need to face our fear to get to the joy on the other side. I would love to hear you speak more about that, because even though I know that the higher my vibration is, the more aligned I am with source energy, the more God is able to get through to me. In this lifetime, I've certainly had my fair share of pain points that have surfaced. And sometimes I get down on myself when I'm in the midst of the pain, because I feel like I'm not being a good Course in Miracles student, because I'm not, as I say, plugged into my God socket. That's why I love in your book, you talk about how important it is to embrace those uncomfortable feelings. Could you speak a little more about that, Rob?
Yeah, what I write about in the 3 books, well, I should back up here and first explain how I researched people's pre-birth plans. So I did that in 2 ways. In the first 2 books, Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift, it's done exclusively by working with mediums and channels who in one way or another can find out what somebody planned before they were born. In the new book that you were talking about, Susan, Your Soul's Love, there are still sessions with mediums and channels, but this time I incorporated the between lives soul regressions that we were just talking about. So what I found in my research of pre-birth planning is that many people, almost everybody who's on the earth plane, has what I call a learning through opposites life plan. So the soul learns best through the experience of contrast, through the experience of opposites. To take a very common example, let's say that a soul has a pre-birth intention to deepen in compassion, which is a very common pre-birth intention. So what that soul might do, would actually be likely to do, would be to plan to be born into a nuclear family that would treat that person with a profound lack of compassion. The absence of compassion in the external environment is intended to drive the person within, where the soul hopes they will over time cultivate self-compassion. And then the second half of that kind of life plan is to take the virtue you've cultivated, in this case, compassion, and turn it outward in service to other people. That's the gist of what we call pre-birth planning, or a learning through opposites pre-birth plan.
So by overcoming the hardship in your life, you learn to develop your strengths. You learn to develop what you were born to teach. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Let me use a metaphor here. Let's say that your pre-birth intention was to know yourself as the light. And so that we have a specific image to work with, let's use candlelight. So your pre-birth intention is to know yourself as the light. When you're here in body on the earth plane, if you want to know yourself as the light, as candlelight, one thing you could do would be to get a candle, light it, take it outside at high noon on a sunny day, and look at the flame. That would give you a certain understanding of candlelight. But something else you could do would be to get a candle, light it, take it outside at midnight on a pitch black night, and then look at the flame. That will give you a very different understanding of candlelight, and I would argue a much better understanding of candlelight. The better understanding comes from the contrast between the pitch black night and the brightness, the candle flame.
So I have a question. So my question is there technology being worked on whereby we can now, or someday, reach the other side, so to speak, reach our soul on a much higher level, connecting through the universe. I think there's something called soul phone. I don't know whether or not there's a reality to that. Could you explain that if there is?
Yeah, this is not my area of expertise, but I happen to know one of the two people who's developing the soul phone, so I know a little bit about it. His name is Mark Pitstick, and he's working with Gary Swartz, who is a professor, I believe, at the University of Arizona. And the two of them have been working on this with a team of engineers for a number of years now. I understand that they're making great progress, and they believe that it will eventually, within our lifetime, allow people to, quote unquote, call loved ones who are back on the other side. I don't have any more details than that, though.
I've heard about it. I'm fascinated with it. I couldn't really articulate it, but yeah, I'm glad there's some validity to it, because it seems like it's certainly a step into the right direction, being able to communicate on a much clearer level, which is wonderful. And when I spoke with you a few weeks ago, you mentioned 2033. Is that going to change things in the notion of, how we're living our life in the world today?
So the reason I mentioned the year 2033, that information comes from a new book, a channel called The Age of the Heart. And it's channeled by an Argentinian gentleman named Sebastian Blacksley, and he channels Jesus. So the book is Jesus speaking to us about what's happening on earth now. And basically what Jesus outlines is that for eons of time, we have been in what he calls the age of reason. So the mind has become predominant over the heart, logic, analysis, intellect, and so forth. That's been humanity's way of living for as long as we can remember. But what he explains is that we live now in a time of huge, huge transition. And a lot is going to happen over the next 10 years. But in particular, in 2033, there will be an event, a physical and metaphysical event of such proportion that it changes the fundamental nature of our reality. And this event is primarily beyond human comprehension. But the fact that, it's coming from Jesus, and if you read the book, I have a lot of experience with channeled material. I've been working in that realm for decades now. And I would like to think I can recognize a good channeled source when I see it. Sebastian Blacksley is an excellent channel. And I have no doubt when I read that book that it's Jesus speaking. The vibration is incredibly high. And you can, the love that's coming out of those words is just palpable. So when Jesus announces, I don't call it a prediction, I say it's an announcement, that our reality will fundamentally change in 2033, I believe that.
We're very familiar with that book, all of us, because Monday nights, in fact, Glenn Hoberman speaks about that, about the Age of the Heart. So, and that's connected to A Course in Miracles. I'm just curious, does anybody else have any questions? Everything's so fast.
One thing I'd like to read quickly, because it's so profound, is a chat from Dove Fishman. He put it in the chat room a little while ago about why we plan bad things, from Rob Swartz, because this is something that I'm fascinated with. So it says, number one, the reason we plan bad things is balancing and releasing karma, feeling of incompletion, feel you haven't balanced so you can't release, trade places, experiences to release karma. Number two, bring these things up for healing. Number three, service to others. Number four, desire to experience contrast. Number five, healing or resolving false beliefs and feelings about themselves, powerlessness, unworthy, worthlessness. The law of attraction will mirror it back for awareness and healing, because again, I've spent my lifetime really trying to gather up the courage to sit with that pain, because I believe the only way to get to the other side of it, to transmute it, is to embrace it. Because if we don't own the pain, it's just going to kind of follow us around. In your book, you also quote, what you resist persists. So it's not about resist. Like, how do I attain enlightenment, before I guess that's my goal in this lifetime, and I know a big learning lesson for me is to own that repressed pain, own that pain from my unconscious. I quote this one line in the Invitation by Araya Mountain Dreamer numerous times, I should say, in my talk. She writes, I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without trying to own it or hide it or fix it. So I believe that that's why a lot of this world continues to project their pain onto other people, because for whatever the reason, they're afraid to own it in order to transmute it. Can you say a little bit more about that, Rob? Because I hear you talking about that a lot in your book, and that's something that I struggle with.
Yeah, so that old saying, what you resist persists, is true. Whenever you go into resistance, or I often use the word aversion to anything at all, even if it's just a feeling of painful energy, a feeling of suffering, you're energetically locking it into place. That's basically how that works. So if you want the suffering to move, to dissolve, to transmute, you have to drop the resistance. And this gets a little bit tricky because you can end up being in resistance to your own resistance, which is just more resistance. So the way around all that, and to free up the suffering so that the energy moves, is basically to allow yourself to feel it. Turn toward the suffering. The average person turns away from it because it's unpleasant. They're in a state of aversion to it. They don't want to deal with it. And so they'll turn away from it. And most people will then engage in some form of self-distraction, which our world provides many, many opportunities to do. Television, work, sex, drugs, alcohol, the internet, and on and on and on. That is not the way to deal with suffering. Turn toward it, sit with it, allow yourself to feel it. Basically, say yes to it. Saying yes to the pain you carry opens the door through which it will eventually walk out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do see Sharon has her hand raised. Sharon, did you want to share or ask a question?
Yes, thanks, Susan. Yeah, I can't get on, Rob, because my camera isn't working. It's broken. Anyway, I wanted to ask you, I have a couple questions for you. First off, I do think everything you're saying is true because so much of my life did happen. It unfolded exactly what I asked for in my childhood. What I mean by that is I always wanted to be an artist, and I told my parents I would have an art school, and I did. And I had a lot of abuse in my life. I was abused, like, like a lot. I mean, really, I guess it wasn't the worst abuse, but it was just, it was tough, So I realized that there was some part I was playing, because my grandmother told me this was a dream, and yet every one of us has our own filter. So everything's a reflection of our mind. So my grandmother telling me that was a dream, it just made sense. And then my ex-husband, who was the most abusive man, and he's my ex-husband, of course, but he used to sing Cats in the Cradle, and he would sing it all the time. And we would say to him, why would you say that? I mean, it's a song about a man that left his children. And that's exactly what happened. So, to me, there's a part of me, because I just have a very sensitive soul. I want to tell him what he did was not, was something that was planned, just because I like to take people's pain away, because he was horrible to me. He tried to kill me, he took all our money. It was just a very dramatic life. This is a question that, I wanted to say to you. It has to be, I don't know whether to tell them or to just let it go. My children would don't believe that they think I'm a little, a lot of people think spiritual people are a little, wacky. But I do agree with a lot of what you're saying. But here's my concern here. The Course in Miracles says the Creator doesn't know we're here. So if the Creator doesn't know we're here, I figured then we just go back to God. We just drop and we just go back to, just to God. And that's just something that I want to know from you. Why does it say the creator doesn't know we're here when the creator is here? Or is it different? Because that's what I thought. Consciousness, in the Course, it says consciousness is the domain of the ego, and it's form here. And form is illusory. It's going to always be illusory. And then I had a teacher, Regina Dawn Akers, who was a channel, and she asked the guidance, what happens when we die? And she said, basically, and she got that also from Ramana Maharshi, that the DNA doesn't come back, because we are absolutely, the personality doesn't come back. It's just the I am that comes back. So these are questions I'm throwing at you. I might be giving you too much information. The other question I had was, I'm reading a book on the Akasha records and I love it. What do you have to say about that? So I gave you a lot of things, and I've just had different experiences, that there's a lot going on here that we do not know. I had things like, I had a meltdown one day, and then on the computer, that Nisargadatta Maharaj came into my messenger, and my sister was there, and it was telling me that everything's a reflection. And it was a message that said it was from Nisargadatta. Then the next day I got a rock that said Lord. So I realized there's a lot going on here. So I threw a lot of questions at you. I don't know which one you want to answer, and I'm sorry if I gave you too many.
I'm not sure I'm going to remember everything you said, but I'll
Well,
try.
that's okay, because I wouldn't expect you to do. I do have ADHD, so just understand I know it. See, form is temporary. That's what I'm saying. So if it's illusory, then if we keep coming back, we're in form. So that's the question. One question I want you to add.
I agree with what Ramana Maharshi said. It's not the personality that comes back. It's the I am presence.
Right.
And it creates a new personality in another lifetime. I've done A Course in Miracles twice. The second time I did it with Myrna's book as a companion at the same time. And I love the Course, but I don't always agree with everything that's in it. And I don't agree with the idea that God or the Creator doesn't know that we're here. My understanding of God is that God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. So not only does God know that we're here, God is here with us as us. I think of the third dimensional world as duality occurring within a field of love. So the universe is primarily non-dual in nature. That's the field of love that I'm talking about. And duality is almost an aberration within this field of love, this field of non-duality. But it's held within God, within love. It's not separate from it, at least as I conceive of it.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah, because I don't, again, I'm okay with even the mystery at this point. The other thing is, what about the Akasha records? Because I'm reading a book by Lisa Barnett. You probably know Lisa's work.
I don't know her particular work, but the Akashic records are a real thing that actually exists. For those who have not heard the term, the Akashic records, it's a non-physical record, a non-physical library that records everything that happens. So everything that has occurred on the earth plane, not just physical actions, but every energy, every thought, every spoken word, every feeling, all of this is recorded in the Akashic record. And it's through the records that some of the mediums that I work with were able to access people's pre-birth plans. So when I was interviewing somebody for one of my books, and we did a channeling session, and we asked Spirit, did this person plan this experience before birth? And if so, why? Sometimes what the medium was doing was going into the Akashic record and looking at the pre-birth plan. And when they're in the record, they can also see past lives and tell us which of the past lives led to the creation of this particular pre-birth plan.
Okay, so that's a great answer too. So really, the whole thing, at the end of the day, do we have a choice? Because I would never. Some people are so cruel, so cruel. What's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Israel. Would these people really ask for that? I mean, that's torture. Their babies murdered. I just don't. That's something that didn't sit well with me.
I believe that they did plan that, and I'll tell you why. I believe that the people who are involved in these conflicts were together in multiple past lives in which they were involved in conflict in those lives. and they weren't able to resolve those conflicts in loving ways. And so they have chosen to come back with each other in another attempt to try to resolve conflict with love.
Okay, that's a good answer too. Well, the I am comes back. I was just going to say to you, because my ex-husband isn't really into this stuff, I'm just going to let it alone and just have a natural forgiveness because I asked for whatever happened to me back then. And I just, feel grateful. And I do feel like I listened to you and your wife last night, your meditations, and I just love them.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I probably will be taking classes with you. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Lynn?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone who's here asking questions. And what I have just recently been shown, because this question did come up and we have discussed it, okay, so I may choose to suffer because I want to learn about suffering. I may choose to be a victim because I want to try to balance something out from a previous experience, or I may choose a life, whatever it is. The reality, or not the reality, that the situation as I was shown is that we as a sonship asked the question, what would it be like if we were not in a world that was bound by the love of God? If love didn't exist here, what would it be like? And when we asked that question, every possibility of what could happen if that were the case was kind of sprung up in this, what we call the illusion. And it holds every story of every situation that could ever happen there, whether it's war, death, hunger, whatever it is. All those things sprung up in that illusion. And they're all stories that are there to kind of show us, well, this what would be like, this what would happen, this is how it could be. And when we made that up, we couldn't all be the victim, because who would be the victimizer? We couldn't all be the innocent little child, because who would be the child abuser? We chose to play those parts so that we could see the totality of the experience. And we keep coming back because we haven't seen the totality of the experience. We still have questions about it. We're still wondering about it. So now we get a chance to see again. Oh, this is what happens if I'm the abuser. This is what happens if I'm the bad guy. And not just what happens when I'm the poor innocent, person. We each get a chance to play all these parts. And, we may have set up relationships with people in one lifetime, one situation. And then, maybe they were the abusive parent and I was the innocent child. And then I come back and I'm the abusive partner and they're the innocent victim. We do all these things so that we can know with no doubt whatsoever that nothing can exist outside the love of God. And so that we can know that, we have to be shown over and over and over. Oh yeah, okay, that's what happens. So, but what about this? Oh, well, that's what happens. Oh, well, what about that? We get to see it. And because we're one mind, a collective mind, we all get to experience it from our point of view. We all get to see from this point of view, this is what it looks like. And from this point of view, this is how I see it. And this is how I'm experiencing it. This is what's affecting me. So it's a collective experience that is a total experience that we have to understand the totality of that experience. And once we recognize, nothing is going to change it. It's always going to be, impossible.
Yeah,
to
what
happen.
you've just said is essentially my understanding of karma. So the popular conception of karma is that it's a punishment for having done something bad in a past life or in a current lifetime. And that is not at all my understanding. My understanding of karma is that it's a feeling of incompletion. So the example I like to give, let's say that there are two souls who had a past life together in which one was ill and the other was the caregiver. When that lifetime is over, they'll have a life review, as we always do at the end of an incarnation. They'll see the caregiving relationship portrayed in the life review. And when they see that, they may or may not feel complete with the experience. If they feel complete with it, then as I understand it, there is no karma, and they'll go on to plan something entirely different. But if they feel incomplete with that experience for any reason at all, then there is karma. There's a desire to complete the experience. So what they might then do, if there's this feeling of incompletion, they might trade places. The one who was ill will plan to be a caregiver. The one who was the caregiver will plan to have an illness. And that kind of thing goes on and on and on until we ourselves decide that we're complete with an experience. But nobody is telling us, you have karma here, you have to balance it. We decide that for ourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly what I saw when I asked the question. And so that's why, we don't, when we decide, which I love that you're talking about the Age of the Heart and Sebastian's work. And when we decide that we are going to be a part of this great awakening and this great opening, what can happen right now in this lifetime is we can decide enough is enough, and I don't want any more experience. This is it. And all I want now is to be a part of this awakening of the human mind, of the sonship to the awareness of love's presence. And so, that's why, we can end, Gary Renard, I don't know if you're familiar with his work,
Yeah.
but he's talked a lot about the end of reincarnation that comes about when we actually decide this is it, and this is the life I live to be the life that is totally dedicated to truth and reality. And that's what I've done, take the Bodhisattva oath and believe and know that that's what we're here for. And I think that everyone that's in this room has at some level, and whatever their experience is, has made that same decision. So this is what I love, and thank you for coming and sharing this stuff with us.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
To complete the experience, it is, in my understanding, it's complete forgiveness and unconditional love. Because when I can truly, I guess, forgive the perpetrator, forgive the victimizer, forgive myself, love them, I guess even connect to the pain behind that trigger point, in my mind, that's how I stop living out that particular experience over and over. Is that correct? I guess I'm saying it to see if this is clear thinking on my part. I will preamble it with one little story. My father passed, but him and I have had a lot of karma in this lifetime. And I remember at one point, I was looking for a mate. I was a Course in Miracles student, and I knew, or I believed, that the way I could find an intimate relationship with a partner was to completely forgive my father. So every morning for about 6 months, I was living at home. I hugged him in my mind. I said, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. For 6 months, I did the best I could to forgive him. And then the next relationship that I got into, that my partner had a lot of qualities that my dad had. So even though I did everything I could to forgive him, my soul still had lessons to learn. I believe it's because even though intellectually I forgave my father, on an emotional level, there was certain pain points that I wasn't able to own. So I still had to work through them in the world. I mean, is that how you complete the experience? Unconditional love and forgiveness and stepping, I guess, owning the pain, correct?
Yeah, and I think it has to be all of those things because probably people here have heard the term spiritual bypass, and this comes up a lot in regard to forgiveness. You know, somebody will do A Course in Miracles or they'll do some other forgiveness program, and it becomes a very intellectual process. They go through all these steps, they check off all the boxes, they do it for a certain period of time, and they get to what feels to them like an intellectual place of forgiveness. But it's not complete because if the other person mistreated them in some way, unless they were able to process the abuse at the time that it happened, which most people can't do, then the energy from the abuse is lodged in the cells of the body. And so that energy has to be freed up and released. And this is why we have so many somatic healing modalities these days. And other people are doing it with psychedelics. And there's just this whole renaissance of healing modalities that has emerged because going through the intellectual process of forgiveness is not a complete healing. You've still got to release the trapped trauma from the cells of the body.
Yes, I like that. I think I've learned so much in this lifetime. I believe that's I recognize that's my soul's purpose because I figured out so much of that recognition where you're right. It's not just about saying I forgive. The way to do it is to recognize the purpose that you really experienced with the individual or individuals that you had these experiences with. And when you recognize what the reason is, what the conflict was, then you begin to see, wow, I'm here. I truly figured out that with my mother, with my early childhood, the relationships in my life, recognizing, yeah, I might have felt abused and been abused, but I also recognized that I've also been the abuser, and recognizing too that it's also painful to be the abuser as well as the abused. And that's how we teach each other the lessons. I am so convinced that I've worked out the problems and problematic experiences that I had. And that's why I have true forgiveness in my heart. And I thank God that God has shown me, because really I just had to open up you have to want this first. You have to have the willingness to want to understand the purpose, your soul's purpose. And the soul's purpose is truly to learn and to now release. That's what we're here to do. So yeah,
That's beautifully put, and I agree with every word you just said.
Yeah, it's wonderful, really.
I do know that the times in this lifetime that I've experienced the greatest joy have always been after the times that I've allowed myself to embrace that pain. Like somehow by connecting to those pain points, I clear the channel and allow more love to come in.
Yeah, there's something about giving your conscious attention to your pain that frees it up to move. I don't understand how that happens, but I know that it happens. And so this is why being in denial of your pain, self-distraction, things like that, that's the exact opposite of what needs to happen. You've got to give it your conscious attention to free it up to move. And then once it's moved, it's like the dark cloud that's blocking the sun. When the cloud moves away, you can see the sunlight. When the pain moves away, then you can feel the joy that has actually been there all along. It was just obscured.
How do you feel about that, Rob? How has it affected you? I mean, you're doing something extraordinary. And the fact that you were really a front runner here with this, how has it affected your karma, if you want to call it that?
Well, I experienced a lot of abuse as a child too. My mother has significant mental health issues and was extremely abusive to me.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, and that was the desire to understand how could this happen. That was one of the driving forces behind the books that I went on to write. I wanted to understand if there's a loving God out there, how can that God allow something like this to happen? So all of the information that I brought forward about pre-birth planning that is in the 3 books, that was tremendously helpful, but it was not a complete healing for me because the trauma was still trapped in the cells of the body. And so I've done other things like some of the somatic healing modalities and given it my conscious attention, and that has freed it up to move and to release.
Sharon, did you
Yeah,
have a
yeah, I
question?
wanted, because I know Dove wants to say anything. You work, you and your wife are doing something with empaths right now. I was told when I was 25, my therapist just got to know me, when I was young, and I saw her for years because I had depression. And like you, Rob, I was abused by my mother. My mother had polio when she had me. She was paralyzed from the neck down, and she became very psychotic, and she would blame me that, I was afraid of my mother, but I loved her dearly. So my therapist would say to me, that after years of knowing me, that I had altruism and I was an empath. And that's why when I hurt somebody, I end up absolutely like I go into a whole, like it's happening to me, or when someone else is hurting, I feel it. So what do you have to say about that, the empath? Because you have a program on Shift now that I was thinking of taking.
Yeah, that actually started just yesterday. It's a 7-week program. There's one module every week, but they record them. So if you end up joining, you can watch the recording from yesterday. My wife is an empath, and she's also a channel. She channels a group consciousness, a collective that we call the Beings of Light. And through her, they channeled most of the content that is in the Shift Network course. So yesterday we were talking about just some general pointers for, if you're an empath and you're going out into public settings, what can you do to not pick up other people's energies or to clear them afterwards if you have picked them up. Next week, we're going to be doing something called the Divine Virtues exercise, which is something that came out of my research into pre-birth planning. And it will tell people the qualities they wanted to work on in this lifetime through the experience of being an empath. In other words, it's one of their main motivations for planning to be an empath in this lifetime. And then in the other modules, we'll just explore all sorts of other topics related to being an empath or a sensitive. So that's on the Shift Network site for those who are interested.
I saw that, yeah, and I'm very interested because you had said it's hard to, I've had, a lot of shifts, and I had fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, I had a lot of, and all of it fell away. I do breath work, so that's helping. Breath work is a good somatic exercise. But I'm actually very interested in this because empaths do, not only do I feel energy, but if my children are hurting, it feels like it's happening to me. Even if I'm projecting it, that's what a Course in Miracles student would say, well, you're projecting it, but it's different. I know empaths are just different. And I was going to say one thing about this group you're with right now. I would say everybody here is an empath because.
Well, you might be interested then, and I'll put this in the chat box. I'll put my website, and if you go there, in the main menu, one of the headings is channelings. Those are my wife's channelings. There's an entire channeling from the Beings of Light called A Message to Empaths, and there's some really good information in there.
Okay,
give me a
thank
second
you.
here, and I'll put this in the chat box. So
And
that's the
Dove,
website.
Can you tell us, Rob, excuse me, I'm sorry, how to get into the Shift Network so we can get into this course? Can you tell us how that can be attained?
If you go to my website that I just put in the chat box,
Yeah.
on the homepage, there is a module referring to the Shift Network Empath course. Just click on that, and that'll take you to the registration page.
Great. Okay, I'm glad you told me.
thank you for asking that, Myrna. And
Yeah.
Dove wanted to say
Yes.
something. Dove?
Yes, first I want to thank you, Susan and Myrna, for inviting Rob to spend this time with us. I really appreciate Rob. I saw you originally at John Mundy's, and I thought it was wonderful. My question is, I hear that Myrna spent like a weekend with you, and then it was a one day. I imagine that you're in the Florida area. Do you ever come to the New York area?
Well, actually, all of the workshops are online. I used to do them in person until COVID came along, and then I moved everything online. But you don't have to travel to do that experience. The next one is on May 5th, if you're interested. And if you click on events at yoursoulsplan.com, scroll down to the May 5th listing. You'll find out all about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. What are the
I guess
questions? Let's
Go ahead,
talk
Myrna.
about, how about indigo children? I mean, I really, you know, am kind of interested in all sorts of expansive ideas relating to spirituality. What about the new children that are being born into this world? Do they have different DNA than we have?
Well, you know, because of my focus on pre-birth planning,
Mhm.
I end up coming into contact with people who have something to say about that. And I have an interesting story for you. Years ago, I was at Findhorn, the spiritual community in Scotland, to give a talk. And a member of the Findhorn community was hosting me in her home. We were sitting around talking one morning, and she said, you know, there's a boy here who lives in the community. His name is Gabriel, and he's very unusual. He's like 8 years old, and he has these very unusual memories, pre-birth memories. We should see if we can find him while you're here. Then a little while later, we stepped out her front door to go somewhere, and who should be riding by on his bike? It's Gabriel. So she calls out to him, Gabriel, come over here. I want to introduce you to somebody. And he comes over, and she says to him, Gabriel, tell Rob what you remember from before you were born. And he says, well, I was with my sister, and we were in this place where we were being shown all of the souls who we could choose as our future parents. And there were many, many souls there to choose from. And they were sort of on like on a platform with different levels. And he said, I was looking at all of these souls that could be my mother and my father, and there was all this light around two of them. And so I pointed to those two and I said, that's who I want as my mother and father. And that's who ended up being his mother and father. So I know indigo refers to other abilities besides this kind of thing. But what I'm seeing in my work is that there are children coming in with these kind of pre-birth memories that most of us who are adults now don't have. And you never heard people talking about this kind of thing, you know, a couple decades ago. But now all these children are showing up who remember their pre-birth planning.
Don't you think it's because the world now is ready for it, that we're ready to accept that?
I think we're ready to accept it. But, you know, in the ascension process, I think what's happening is that the veil between the dimensions has become quite thin, and Earth's vibration has increased tremendously. So the sort of separation between the worlds that used to exist, it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And that allows children like this to come in with those memories. Previously, you know, Earth was such a dense, low vibration. You were in a state of total amnesia once you came into body. But now that doesn't have to happen anymore.
Yeah, the age of the heart speaks about that. The various sixth wave, I think it's the sixth wave of consciousness. I think that's how it's termed. There's a lot of talk about fourth and fifth dimensional consciousness that we're really involved in now. I've heard you speak about that too, Rob. I heard you talk about it with Dorothy Shelton on YouTube, and that was a fascinating talk. Can you just put a little light on that too?
Yeah, my understanding is that Earth and everybody on Earth has already moved from the third dimension, or what is really called third density, into fourth density, which is a much higher vibration. And we're on our way to fifth density, which is a vibration of oneness consciousness and unconditional love. So essentially, we're going home, but staying in a physical body while we do it. That's basically what ascension is. And to be in body for an ascension lifetime is an extraordinary gift, blessing, and experience. My understanding is there were many, many more souls who wanted to incarnate now than available bodies. So you actually had to go through a selection process and be chosen to be here. And you were chosen because you have something to offer the ascension process.
Will there be souls left in the third dimensional well, the rest of the consciousness increases, will there be that type of thing that the density will exist for certain people, or is it going to be just obliterated completely?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question, and the channel literature on that question is contradictory. There are good channeled sources that say there's going to be what they call a splitting of the worlds, and some will go into fifth density, some will continue into third density. But you probably know from studying A Course in Miracles, God is inclusive. So this idea that some are going to be sorted out and have to continue with third density experience, that's inconsistent with the idea of God including everybody. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, but you're right. God is oneness. God includes, I mean,
Yeah.
every consciousness is connected to, we're all connected to God. The Course in Miracles teaches us that our bodies are separate. That's what we created our bodies to be separate from God. We wanted to be separate. And that's why we suffer so much, because we are not a part of the, unless you begin to see that you are, that's what you are. We were created from love. We are love. We are God. And once you recognize that, once you begin to feel that, then you realize that we are all connected. So yeah, I just wondered if that was, it was just what you're saying. Go ahead.
I just want to add on to that. In Your Soul's Love that I've been listening to for the past 3 days, you were saying that in reality, we are just one with God. But when we're complete love, we can't understand who we are in a way, like by being separate and by living in a dualistic world, we're able to understand what love is by contrast, by seeing the opposite. And when I heard I think you have someone reading the book, but when I heard the Your Soul's Love book clarify that, it really made sense to me. Because if all we know is love, we can't truly understand who we are. But by the contrast, we know what non-love feels like. So then we can be more grateful for being connected to source energy. Is that correct, Rob?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And that's point number 4 that Dove typed into his list of 5 points there. So where he wrote desire to experience contrast and put not love in parentheses, it's a desire to experience what I'm calling not love, which we would all agree there's a lot of here on the earth plane. And it's not pleasant, certainly, to experience not love. But it's through the experience of not love that we come to understand what unconditional love really and truly is. So by the time you go home at the end of an incarnation, that experience of not love, it's given you a more profound self-knowing. You understand who and what you are as a being made literally from the energy of unconditional love.
Lynn, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, okay. It's kind of, it's like there are some people like Jesus and other ascended masters who have already reached that density, that higher plane of existence. So I can see a point that, yeah, maybe some will, have a higher understanding of their consciousness than others, because in reality, we're all the same. The truth and reality of us is that we are all the one Son of God and the one mind of God. So what we think we are, though, the way we express ourselves and the way we see ourselves as being separate beings. And as we become more and more aware of the truth of what we are in the one mind of God, then we do ascend. We do become, we have a higher vibration. We move into a higher state of being. We have a higher level or ability to communicate. We can hear things and know things that, in our slumbering, dreaming mind, we would not have been able to see. But each of us is going through right now that very shift that is lifting us up. And then there are some folks still in the world that are have no thought about this, none whatsoever. And so, they wouldn't notice if, we all started, walking on water and they wouldn't notice it anyway. We would still be here in that higher state, which, Jesus and Buddha and, other ascended masters, they were still here walking around in the world, but they were of the consciousness of awareness of what they truly are. So, I think there's a possibility, that it started as a trickle, and I think it's becoming a flood.
I
I think
agree with that. I think that if you were creating a curve of the awakening, it's an exponential growth curve. I apologize. I had this for an hour in my schedule, and I'm actually going
Thank you. There's no reason to apologize, Rob. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Yeah, our hour is up, and I've learned so much, and I am going to check out your website and your seminars, and thank you so much. You're fabulous.
Yeah,
You're
I can't
welcome.
believe the hour is up. It just went too fast.
It's
Thank
a
you.
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you.
Pleasure to be with you today. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
And we would love to have you again
Of
anytime.
course.
If you if you want to come back, we would love to see you.
I would like that.
All right. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Bye-bye.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. I love you all.
I love you. Thank you, Myrna. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.